Okay, so this presentation is labeled advanced, and just to let you know, there really is no organization or convention out there that really defines what risk is advanced or not advanced. So for you, if you already embrace the concepts we'll be discussing, you might judge that concept as basic. But what's important is that your process achieves the goal of being the best it can be at helping you manage your risk in your organization. So we'll look at what are mature processes in each of the risk areas, and certainly mature includes basic as well as advanced. Another caveat, this presentation has a learning objective, meaning at the end of the presentation you'll have information you can apply on the job. So contrast that to a motivational speaker. They just don't put many bullet points up and all the content is in their presentation. This one with intent has a lot of content in the presentation and the notes that go along with it. So at the end of the presentation, if you'd like a copy of the presentation with notes, please feel free to email me so you have all that content information for yourself. So what's mature? What's advanced? We're going to look at mature risk identification, risk qualification, quantification, mitigation, trigger events, strategy, organizational risk tolerance, mature risk monitoring, and mature risk communication, and some other related risk topics. So one main question, because I hear it all the time, people telling me that risk management means risk reduction. So is that right? Is it a mature risk process to avoid or to minimize risk? Is that what that means? So one key concept of maturity. So how many of you work for companies that need to be new, innovative, and creative in order to stay competitive? So the projects you're working on are sometimes there to achieve that kind of a goal. There's a result the business wants, and if it's creative and innovative, then the context to manage a risk in that project may not be that we want to reduce the risk. We need to look at each risk. We need to look at what is the risk versus the benefit, and what is the risk tolerance of the sponsor and stakeholders. So just because you can reduce or eliminate a risk doesn't mean you should. So back to that example, if you have a highly innovative project outcome, how likely are you to achieve the desired results if you reduce or eliminate the risks, like emerging technology is inherently risky? So it's not all about risk reduction so much as risk management so that you can achieve the project objective. So what mature risk identification looks like. So again, that will include basics as well as advanced concepts. So you'll have something in place that enables you to identify most risks, like lessons learned, like inherent risks that are common in your industry. You'll want to reduce the number of unknown risks. Again, sometimes our lessons learned will tell us some of the types of areas, maybe not specific risks, but areas that might produce a lot of risk or have in the past. We need to include not just the project risk, so it's not just risk to your schedule, to your cost, but what about product risk? So product being the outcome of the project, the quality of that, and more we're understanding that we need to go post-go live. So if I had a process, for example, and I wanted to improve something, and I achieved that on implementing my project outcome, what about sustainability? What about 6 months from then? Will we be able to sustain it? So post-go live risks also need to be included in a mature risk identification process. It occurs early in the project and actively. So that's a key concept you all know, but I still see people that are doing it early and not very actively throughout the project. So risk, and the other thing is, I also see still too many times when I read the risk and they're the uncertainties rather than the trigger events. So, for example, if you said your risk was that you would not be coming in on schedule, you would not make your budget, those are not things that's not expressed in a way that you can mitigate them or have a response plan. So what we need to do is we can have a response plan to a trigger event. If I said I'm worried about the schedule being late, then what are the things that might cause that? If I had one of my key team members that was kind of talking under the table about, I don't know, I'm thinking about retiring or leaving or what have you, that would be a risk that we could address. Somebody might of importance leaving, maybe I could do some knowledge transfer, have somebody shadow them, things like that. So be sure that your risks are expressed as trigger events and not as the impact or uncertainty. So some risk identification. Make everyone on the team a risk identifier. Have a structured risk identification process. So we're going to use lessons learned. Make sure that you are addressing common topics that are of concern to your stakeholders today, like being green, aligning to department strategy, and certainly resistance to change. Organizational, cultural change is a big risk in a lot of your projects. Have an inherent risk checklist. If you're using emerging technology, inherent risk. If we have a project manager that is not done large or complex project, inherent risk. Things that are unique to your organization, and they're like a checklist. They're asking you, well, do you have these things in play, and if so, do you consider them risks? And of course, continual identification of risks throughout the project. Include opportunities. Don't forget, we want not just negative risks, things that could go wrong, but is there any opportunity? Example is if you are struggling with funding for the project and you have a grant opportunity, but it includes a component that's not initially part of your scope, then perhaps that would be something the stakeholders would entertain so that we would qualify for that grant funding. So don't forget your risk opportunities. Train the team prior to risk identification. If I want the team to be a risk identifier, then we need to tell them what a good risk looks like. Provide examples of poorly written risks. Provide examples of well-written risks. Make sure your change control process includes risk identification, not just impact of that change, how will it impact my resources, my schedule, my cost, my budget, but is it introducing risks? And make sure that's part of your change control process. And absolutely every risk must have an owner. Of course, the best owner is someone who's impacted if the risk becomes a reality. Again, be sure the risk description includes the triggers and events as well as the impact. When dealing with vendors, ask them, do they have lessons learned in similar projects with their other customers? What are the things they see popping up again and again? Another concept that's when a single number, such as an average, is used to describe a trigger event or your risk impact or uncertainty.